Today we're going to extend our action RPG by adding a simple pause menu, as well as some save and load functionality. Hi, my name is Michael, and welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. We are learning how to build a top-down 2D game that features action, adventure, and RPG mechanics all in Godot 4 using GDScript. Alright, in our last video, we had worked on a system where our player can navigate or, travel between scenes. And there's a lot of things that we could do next. So obviously, we've got enemies that we can kill, we've got scenes that we can move between. We want to add things like item drops that our player can pick up. And that was an interesting little bug. The hitbox was still there after the player died, or an enemy died. We'll fix that later. But we want to be able to do things like pick up items and have it go to an inventory, save our game, keep track of areas we've visited maybe, just various things. So what we're going to do today is we're going to build a very simple and basic pause screen whose only functionality is to support a very basic save system. So we're going to have a pause screen with a save and load button, and we're going to have a simple save system that'll track where our player is and what their health currently is, the maximum health as well as the current hit points, and then the ability to load that. And I want to build this in a way that as we build features in the future, we'll be able to add to or include those features in our save system. So like if we have inventory that we start to build, we'll be able to include that in the save system, and so on. Let's get started by building our really simple pause menu. So let's go to our GUI folder and let's create a new folder that we'll call pause menu. And this is going to be similar to the other UI things we've made, the scene transition and the player HUD. I'm going to go ahead and create a scene here underneath pause menu and call it pause menu. And this scene, let's change it to one of those canvas layer nodes. Okay, we've got a canvas layer, it's called pause menu. And we're going to need a script for our pause menu. And let's go ahead and apply that script to our scene. And let's just do a couple things here. Let's see, first, we're going to need our pause menu to always be running, I think. Right? So even if we pause the game, we don't want this script or this scene to pause. So let's just change its mode, process mode to always. And then let's see, we've got a script. Let's go ahead and open that script. Okay. And before we really get into the script, though, let's just real quick and flesh out this UI a little bit. So let's add a child node. I'm going to add a color rect. And we'll just use the anchor presets to make it fill the screen and pick a color, any color you want. I'm going to pick kind of a dark gray color with just a little bit of transparency. Let's add a VBox container. So this is just a container that's going to stack items vertically. And then underneath here, let's add a button. Just a regular old button. Duplicate that. Okay, you can see we've got two buttons here. So let's take our first button and let's call it button_save. And then we can rename our other button button_load. So we're going to have one button to save the game and one to load it. And we can go in here into our button and give it some text. And another thing we can do is take our VBox container and resize the width, and our buttons are going to fill it with the default settings that it has. And then you can choose where you want these buttons to appear. I'm just going to put I guess in the center. I don't know. You can use this center anchor preset if you want. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add some text. You could add a label as a child of the VBox container or as a child of the pause menu. And I'm going to add it as just a child of the pause menu right now. The advantage of putting it with the VBox container is it's just going to fit right in here and bump down with those. And I'm just going to give this some text. Just say paused. Now, when I was prepping for this tutorial, I really wanted to get into customizing these UI visuals, but I decided that for this tutorial, probably not the best use of our time. I want to get straight to the save stuff. So we'll work on customizing UI themes in a future tutorial. But I'm going to go ahead and take this pause thing. I'm going to center it and then just drag it up above here. And let's see. I want to change the color, I guess. So you can change the color of the text, or we can just modulate it. I don't know. It's up to you. Maybe I'll leave it white and give it an alpha. Okay. So now we've got a screen that will show when we're paused that has two buttons, save and load. I think that's probably all we need to do to get this set up. Okay, so now that we've got that set up, let's open our script and let's see, we're not going to give it a class name because we're going to auto load this. So let's just set this script to extend a canvas layer, since that's the node type that we're applying it to. And right now we don't need to do a whole lot, and we'll probably come back and revisit this, but let's go ahead and take our two buttons, select those and hold control and drag them in to get those added to our script here. Okay, so we've got our two buttons, save and load, and I'm going to add one variable. I don't know if this is super necessary, but I want a Boolean just to help me track if we're paused or not, if the pause screen thinks it's paused or not. We're not going to need any process function in this script. So to start out, we want to be able to show the pause menu, and we want to be able to select the buttons. We want to be able to close the pause menu. So let's build that real quick. And actually, so that we can start testing this, let's go to our project, settings, Autoload, and then let's add this UI, this pause menu scene. And yeah, make sure it's got a name you like. Pause menu is good. You can just add that. Okay, so now when we run our game, it should actually be on top, right? Because we didn't hide it or anything. Okay, there we go. We've got a pause menu. Got some buttons that aren't doing anything right now. I actually thought they would be clickable already, but we'll figure that out. So, okay, we know that the pause menu loads and it works. And actually, let me go back there real quick. You'll notice that it's stacked underneath the hit points UI because we gave that, I think, a higher Z index. And I actually like that. I'm going to leave that so that when you pause the game, you don't have to display the health in a second UI. You know, it won't get covered up. Okay. So let's go back to our script. We actually should do one other thing in our project settings. We're going to utilize some of Godot's predefined input settings. Let's go to project settings and go to the input map. So we had set up, down, left, right, and attack. Let's add one new action that we'll call pause. Okay, and then for pause, you're going to want to just hit add and hit the buttons. I'm going to use escape. And then if you've got a joypad that you want to set up, you can go ahead and add that. So I've got my PS4 controller. Oops, I hit the touchpad. I'll hit start menu. There we go. So those are the two buttons that are going to be bound for pause. Now I want to show you something though. We're not going to add other actions for the pause menu, and we don't want to necessarily use the actions that are defined here. If you click this little toggle to show built-in actions, you're going to see there's a UI accept, select, cancel, focus next, previous, UI left, UI right. And there's a lot that's predefined. Now there's some really good benefits to these. You'll notice that the UI left and right and whatnot, they already are bound with keyboard and joypad buttons, including the joypad, the stick should be bound by default. And this is actually really handy because a lot of Godot's UI systems are already built to look for actions from these. Okay, so we don't necessarily need to repeat those. The only one thing I want to do is we can actually add to these actions. And if you look at UI accept, for example, there's not a joypad button bound to this one. So I'm going to go ahead and add one and just use, cross on the PlayStation to add that. We do have a select. We don't have one for cancel. I'm going to go ahead and add that. And I'm going to use circle on my PlayStation. You can use whatever you want, obviously. And then you might want to in the future come back and use like focus next or focus previous or whatever. But for right now, I just want the select and the cancel, or the accept and the cancel. I want those bound. So, okay. I think that's all we'll do there. But there now you can see and update these built-in actions. Just be careful with them. You don't really want to remove them or do anything like that unless you know what you're doing. Okay, and then you can just toggle those back off when you don't need to see them. So we'll go ahead and close this. Okay, so we now should have the key bindings and the button bindings that we need to be able to make our little menu work. We're going to skip the ready function, and we're going to actually use the unhandled input unhandled input is going to take any key presses or input events that haven't been handled by another script previously, and it's going to check them. And we'll use this to decide if we need to show the pause screen or not. So if the event is action pressed, and then the action that we want to check for is pause. So if the pause action is pressed, then we'll just do this. So let's see, if is paused equals false. So if it's not paused, then we'll pause it, right? We'll do something here. I'm just gonna go pass for now. And then if not, we'll do something else. And then we don't necessarily have to do this, but we're gonna do this as an educational thing, I think. So I mentioned with this function, unhandled input, it'll take any unhandled input. UI will tend to handle an input and therefore consume it, so other scripts won't look for it. But this script right here, obviously when we handle this input, it doesn't automatically become handled, this pause pressed. So what we can do is within this if statement, when we're handling it, we can say get viewport and then dot set input is handled. And now Godot's going to consider this input, this event as handled, and then any other future scripts that run this will not see that event. That's just one way to prevent things from getting picked up by multiple scripts or things like that, if there's a specific order that they should try and consume them. We need a function to show our pause menu and one to hide it. So let's create those. Let's make a function called show pause menu. And we don't need to pass any arguments into this. So the show pause menu, we're going to set the visibility of this node to true. We're going to set our is paused variable to true. And then the only other thing we're going to do is let's do this. Let's pause the game. Let's get, I'm going to do this first, get tree dot paused. So that's going to get like the root of the whole game. Just set it to paused. And that's why we want our pause menu to have the process to always, otherwise this script, you know, the default is inherit. So it would become paused as well. And then the script's functions don't run when it's paused. Okay, so we're going to pause it, make it visible, set our variable. We're actually going to come back in a bit and just add a tiny bit to that, but let's go ahead and just get this so we can test it out. So let's go hide pause menu. Now this one should do basically the same things. I'm going to grab these 3 lines of code, copy them, paste them, but instead they should be set to false. Okay, so now let's go up here. So let's see, if it's not paused, then we'll call the show pause menu. And if it is paused, we'll call the hide pause menu. So if we hit escape, we're going to pause or unpause. Let's also do one more thing. Right now our pause screen is showing. As soon as this script runs, let's just call the hide pause menu so that it'll hide it. Okay, let's run the game. No pause menu. Now if I hit escape, game paused. I'm pressing my arrow keys and the player does not move. And then I can hit escape again and we'll go back. Now one thing is you'll notice our buttons aren't quite working. So let's fix that. Now, actually the first thing that we'll do, let's go back to our show pause menu and let's just do this at the end of our script. Let's take our button _save. That's the first button. And then we'll call this grab focus method. And what that's going to do is it's going to focus the button. So if we don't focus anything, then by default, none of the buttons are going to be focused. Let's run this and see if this works. Yeah, there we go. The mouse isn't doing anything, and I'm not sure why, but you can see that I can move it with my arrow keys. And what's really cool, because these buttons are in close proximity and they share the same parent node, Godot already knows that they're connected, so I didn't have to do any special setup to get these to work with the arrow keys. And if I hit enter, you can see, you know, and I'll go ahead and press X on my joypad and test the direction on my joypad. Yeah, so that's working. So cool, we've got some buttons. Obviously they don't do anything yet, and we'll hook those up later, but I'll hit escape, close the menu. Okay, there we go. We've got our basic pause menu. In the future, we'll like make these buttons smaller, move them around, add our inventory, stuff like that, right? But for now, this is all we're going to use it for. Okay, now that we've got the beginnings of our pause menu set up, let's start building out this SaveManager. So let's go to our global folder, and I'm going to create a new script in here. And I'm going to follow the naming convention that I've already established and just call it global_SaveManager. Okay. And let's go ahead and let's add this to our Autoload scripts. So let's look for the SaveManager script. Let's see. I'm just going to change the name from Global SaveManager to SaveManager. You know, you could avoid putting the global underscore on yours, and then you wouldn't have to rename it like that, but whatever. It is what it is for me. I'm actually gonna, I don't know if this is important, but I kind of think I want my SaveManager to be instantiated before my pause menu, just in case I do anything where they connect at the beginning. So, okay, I just moved that up. Go ahead and close this, and let's open this new script. Because it's an Autoload script, we do not need to give it a class name, and in fact, we should not give it a class name. Let's set up a few of the variables that we're going to need. So we're going to set up one constant, and a constant is a variable that cannot be changed. We're going to set up one called SavePath, and all this really is just telling, it's just a way for us to store in case we need to use it multiple times, the location. And Godot by default will save, when you give it this user folder, it's going to save in like the, you know, if you're on Windows, it's going to be like the local host folder. If you're on Android, it's somewhere else, you know, but this works across all different systems. I think we're going to need some signals. So I'm going to set up 3 game loaded, game saved, I guess. And then one more signal called, we don't need any other signals. We'll just do the 2. Okay. And then we're going to set up one other variable here, and it's going to be a dictionary. I'm going to call this variable current save. So there's a lot of different ways we could go about creating our save data and object. And what we're going to do here is we're going to utilize a dictionary, which is just a key value pair kind of variable. And what that means is I'm just going to go ahead and create my first key value pair here. We're going to call this scene path and then set it equal to nothing, but that means that we've got a string. And then I can type comma, and then I'm going to type player. Whoop. So the key is the first part of this variable, right? And depending on how you write these, they could also, oftentimes the key will be written in quotations like that. But we're going to use a key called player. This is going to store an object or another dictionary of all of our player data. And our player needs to track the hit points, the max hit points, and then we need probably to get our X position here, POS underscore X, POS, that's a good one, right? Okay, that equals 0. We like our player, he's not a POS. And then we'll just set this to 0. Now, the reason I'm not storing these as a vector2 is because we're going to serialize this data as a JSON format. That means we're going to transform or translate this data to a string that will be stored in a file format known as JSON. And if you're not familiar with that, it's heavily used in web technology. It's human readable. We'll be able to open this file. We'll do this today and kind of see the data and manipulate it. The biggest advantage is that it's human readable and that it's common, and it, you know, is kind of cross-platform type of format. The biggest disadvantage is that it's human readable. So your players, if they find the save folder, they poke around a little bit, they could come in here and manipulate this, okay? So I'm not gonna cover how to do it in any more secure ways in this tutorial. You could serialize it to a binary format, and Godot has support for that built in. And it shouldn't be too much different than what we're going to do here. So, you know, maybe we'll do that in the future, but if not, then that's going to be maybe an exercise for you to explore. And if you want to get ahead of me, go for it. I'm going to put a comma after the player. We're not going to use these other, variables that I'm setting up here, but we're going to want an array of items. I think we're going to want an array of things that we call persistence. So these are going to be any variable that we want to save between save games or levels that, you know, like maybe the player picks up an item or opens a chest and we want it to remain opened from that point forward, right? Or maybe we have something else like they flip a switch that should stay flipped, whatever it is. And then we'll put one called quests. these are all things that I intend to build as part of this tutorial. So we're going to just put it in our save dictionary, and then we'll use them in future tutorials. But for now, they're just going to be empty arrays or empty lists that will populate later. Okay, so that's our current save. This is our dictionary that we're going to use to track our data. Now, this script is going to have to be responsible for a few things, right? We need to be able to save a game, load a game, and maybe gather some of the data that we need to load, or at least be a point where we can send the data that needs loaded. So it's going to need to be able to handle and deal with this current save. So let's do this. Let's set up our save game function. I keep typing slash. Okay, so let's go func save game. And then let's set up a load function. And for the sake of testing, let's do this. Let's just have it print to the console so that we can just test these and make sure they work, right? So we'll print save game when the save game function is run. And we'll print load game when the load function is called. And we'll fill these out. But what I want to do is I want to hook up our pause menu to these functions so that we can use that to test it. One thing you could do is add just like hotkeys to test these, you know, a function key or whatever you want to do. And that's perfectly fine, but this is a little bit safer because we won't accidentally, you know, add some key inputs and then forget to remove them. And then the player's like pressing keys and saving and loading the game when you don't want them to. Alternatively, you know, I'm just going to throw this out there. You may not want the player to be able to save from a save menu. You might want them to only save when they interact with a save point in the game. And that's perfectly fine. And that concept will work just as well here as it will with this save menu concept that we're going to build. But this is just an easy way to get it in there without having to add multiple save points throughout the map. Okay, so let's go to our pause menu script. And what we need to do in this script is we need to handle when our save and load buttons are pressed. So let's just scroll down here in our file and let's add two functions that we can call. So I'll call this on save pressed, on save pressed, and then we'll do one for on load pressed. Okay, so on save pressed, what's it going to do? First, I want to put a check in here just because I don't know if this could accidentally get clicked when it's not paused, but I'm just going to say if it's not paused, then let's just ignore this function. Don't do anything. Otherwise, let's call our SaveManager and call save game. Okay. And then maybe we also just want the menu to close at that point, right? So let's just call hide pause menu. There we go. That's our on save pressed, and some of this is actually going to be the same for on load pressed. Let's do, okay, so if paused equals, yeah, still if it's not paused, we don't want to do this, but instead of calling save game, when they press the load, let's call load game, and then we'll hide pause menu. And we need to connect our buttons for those to work. So let's go button save pressed dot connect. And then this one will just connect our on save pressed function. And then the other one's going to be the load button. When the load button is pressed, it should call the load function on load pressed. So if we run our game, if we've done everything right, let me just shrink it a little bit so we can see our console. We'll go to the pause menu. Yeah, I hit enter on save and you can see that it logged save game and load game. Okay, so we've successfully connected our pause menu to our SaveManager. Now we need to make these functions do what they need to do. Now the first thing, let's deal with saving the game. And before we do this, I want to show you something. We're going to use this a few times. So let's go to project, and then you can see there's an option here to open the user data folder. Okay, it's going to open the folder. And you can see that I'm in like my user files under AARPG tutorial, and you've got logs and a shader cache and some data related to Vulkan rendering. Okay, that's what this user : / ends up pointing to, is to this folder here. So you'll see once we save our game the first time, it's going to add a new file. Okay, now in order to do this, let's go to our save function. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to get our file, and we can use this file access singleton and then call open. Okay, so this is going to try and open a file. We need to give it a path, which includes the file name. So for us, this could be save path plus, and then we need to give it a name. We could actually put this as part of the variable up above, you know, whatever. But let's say we want our save game to be called save.sav. Okay, easy enough. And then we need to tell it the type of access we want. And for let's see, for saving the game, I guess we're going to need write. And then let's see, what we need to do is, what happens is if this file doesn't exist, then it should create it. Let's create a new variable in here. We'll call this save JSON. And what this is we're going to use this JSON.stringify. And what this does is it's going to turn whatever we pass into it as a JSON string, and we'll just pass in our current save dictionary in this file. So what that'll convert this to a format that we can save. And then what we'll do is let's go file, let's get our file that we've loaded, and then let's store the line, store_line. So we're going to add a line, and we want it to be our save JSON. And then let's go ahead. Well, let's do one thing here. We've got a signal we want to emit, right? Game saved. Let's do that. .emit. So that way, anything that might be listening, like, oh, was the game saved? They'll get a signal that it was just saved. And then let's just go ahead and run this. I'm going to hit escape and hit save. Okay, but let's go over to this folder. You can see there's our save file that we created. I'm going to go ahead and open this with Notepad++ here, and you can see that this one line, this JSON string, has all those same variables that we set up in our save game script. Items, persistence, player. It's like ordered alphabetically instead of the order that I entered them, but that's okay. There's a player object with HP of 1, max HP of 1, position 0, 0, quests, and a scene path. That's good. It's working. It saved something. Let's provide the game a way to actually get some data about our player into that save file. And so that we don't bloat this save game function here, let's create some new functions that'll help us gather the data we need. And let's see, let's just go down here. Let's start with updating the player data. Now, because we have the global player available, this is going to be fairly easy actually. So let's just create a new variable called P of type player and set it equal to the player in our player manager. Oops, not minus. This is just so that it's easy, so we don't have to type this line over and over. We're just going to be able to type P. So let's update our current save. So current save dot player dot HP equals P dot HP. And then let's just copy this line a couple times. We're going to get the max HP and the 2 positions, right? So let's change this second one to max HP. And let's see, this is POS_X, and this is POS_Y. Okay, so we're just going to grab our player and get these. Oh, except we don't have these variables on our player, do we? What we need to get is get the player's global position. Okay, that should work. Let's copy that. Okay, so we've got our global position X and Y. We're going to save those here. Let's go ahead and just add. So you see what we're doing here is I'm actually updating the current save directly in this function. So all we need to do is take this function update player data, and when we call save game, before we save it and everything, let's just call update player data. So if this all works, instead of our player data having HP of 1 and a max HP of 1 and these positions of 0, it should reflect accurately whatever's going on in our game. So actually our player probably is at 0, 0 right now. So let's just move, hit save. Now if I go back to that file in my notepad, it's going to say, hey, it's changed. Do you want to reload it? Yeah. There we go. So now we've got HP of 6, max HP of 6, and check it out, we've got a position X and Y. Okay, that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. We're going to be able to utilize those when we load the game to put him right in that spot and, you know, update his hit points. The only other thing we want to do is we want to update this scene path. This is going to store the scene path, the path to the scene or the level that he was in when we saved the game. So let's create a function to save that. I guess we'll call it update scene path. Now I got to emphasize with this one, and I should have done it earlier, but I don't know if this is the best way to do it or if there's a better way to do all this saving, but this is just the way I chose to do it. So hopefully you guys learned something, but you know, I think the golden rule with game development is if it works and it's fun, then it really doesn't matter. There's probably, you know, you did it fine. And maybe that's not the best way to go when you're trying to improve your skills, but I don't know, whatever. So let's see, what we're going to do here is create a string to the path that we're going to save. And what we want to do is we want to find the current level in the scene tree and then get its path and save that. So let's do this. Let's say for C in, so we're going to loop over all of the items in the root of our game. So get tree.root is going to get the root node and then get children. So we're going to go through all the children and then we're just going to check if for each one that we check if it's a level. And we should only ever have one of these because of the way we've built this. You know, if you're doing something different, you might need to change it. So our variable P that we're going to save, right, is going to be equal to the node or the child node that we're looking at. And then there's a variable called scene file path. I love how Godot just stores that in there, so there's no confusion. And then outside of this for loop, we'll just update our current save dot scene path and set it equal to P. So now if we save, run our game, and let's go hit escape and let's hit save, and then let's go look at it in that save file. Okay, in our save file, I'm not seeing the scene path. Oh, well, it's good that we built this. We should probably call this function. Okay, save game, update player data, update scene path. There we go. Now let's run it. So let's hit save. And now let's check it out again. There we go. We've got a resource path to our scene. Perfect. And so you see this is area 1, scene 01. If we come back here and move down to a different scene and hit save. Yeah, I want to reload it. There you go. You can see it's area 02. And the position has changed. And let's just do one more test. If we run over here to these enemies, let's take some damage. Boink. Okay, lost a heart. I'm gonna go back, save my game. And there we go, HP 5 out of 6. Okay. Now the reason why I do suggest probably not saving from the menu and maybe putting this onto a like a save point type mechanic is just so if the player doesn't come and like stand right here and save the game, and that's where the enemy spawns, you know, or having to track the location of every enemy when you save the game in a scene, that becomes more complicated. And having a save point, it just is a way to eliminate a huge number of complications with saving your game. Okay. So, you know, whether that's making save only available when you're on a certain type of scene or whatever. But again, for right now, we're just building this basic save and load functionality. And, you know, you can handle all of the edge cases that you have on your own or figure out the best way you want to use it. But this code and this setup will get you, you know, well on your way to building your own save system. So saving the game is actually pretty straightforward, as you can see, because of the way we've kind of built this. And in the future, when we need to add additional data to the save, you can add it here. You know, you could also be updating this current save file outside of when the player actually saves the game. I mean, maybe as soon as the player picks up a key item, you're going to update the current save. And then the next time it saves, you know, it'll have that new item, whatever. You can figure that out. And that takes some planning and testing based on your own game. But this will work. And then let's look at this load game. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this print statement from save game. Don't really need that anymore. I'm gonna do the same for load. So what our load game function needs to do is it needs to open this file that we saved to. It needs to get the data, parse it out of there, save it into our current, or update the current save file with it. But it also needs to kind of update the player, right? It needs to tell the player like, hey, you need to update your health and you need to position here. And it also needs to load whatever scene was saved in that save file, okay? So it's gonna be a tiny bit more involved than the save game, but maybe not a whole lot more. But we're gonna have some more code in here just to make this run smoothly. So let's start. We're gonna get a reference to our file just like we did in our save game. Let's see, let me think for a second. So this is still doing using that file access .open. And we can just copy and paste this code here. The difference is we're not going to be writing to the file, so we only need to open this as a read. But we've got this file, so we're going to open it in a read-only fashion. And then we want to get a reference to the JSON data that we've stored in there. Now JSON is stored line by line. If we look at our save file, there's only technically one line, right? It just keeps running on. And that's okay. And that's actually kind of nice because it's going to make it a little bit easier to parse. So let's go ahead and let's do our JSON. And we're actually going to create a new JSON string here, I guess. And it's going to be empty. But then here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this JSON and we're going to parse the first line of our file, okay? So that's why I say it's handy that there's only one line in there. So when we do file.getLine, it's gonna get the first, well, it's gonna get the line where the cursor is essentially where it's reading. And if we look at this file access.read, oh boy, let's find read in here. Opens the file for read operations. The cursor is positioned at the beginning of the file. Okay, so the cursor is gonna be like right here. So when we say that read the first line, it's gonna get that line. Okay, or get line, I guess, is what that's gonna do, right? Okay, so we've successfully read that data, but now we need to convert it back to a file we can use, and we're just gonna create a new file temporarily, a new dictionary. And we're gonna call it, you know, I've been doing this colon equals on this one, and that's partly because of the documentation. I followed it, and they do that a lot, but this is the same as colon equals is kind of like casting it as whatever it is, but that's the same as saying save dict is a dictionary that equals, right? It's the same thing. So then let's do this. Let's go JSON. Let's take our JSON file. There's a function in here called getData that we can use and cast it as a dictionary. Okay, so we're going to take that JSON data and convert it to a dictionary, and then let's just update our current save with that save dictionary. So now we've done that. We've updated the current save. So this part is going to read all of the data into the game and put it into this. It's going to just be here in the SaveManager in the current save. So from this point forward, what we need to do is we need to take the current save data and send it back out and make the updates that we need to. So we're going to utilize our level manager and our player manager that we've built in previous projects. So if you're following this one and you haven't been following along with the series, you're gonna have to do your best. You may want to go back and find the episodes where we build those, or you can replace it with your own code. So the first thing that we're gonna want to do is let's get our level manager. If you recall, this keeps track of this helps us, I don't know, manage the level that we're in. Obviously, that's why we called it this. And let's do load new level. And if you recall, the load level function wants a path, it wants a target transition area that it should spawn at, and it wants a position, or an offset, I should say. We actually only really care in this case about the current saves scene path, right? That's the path that we're gonna load. And so what we're gonna do is for the area that it's going to spawn at, the transition area, we're going to leave that blank. And for the offset, we'll just set it to 0. Because we're gonna position our player with our own little code instead of using this. Okay. But this will load the scene. And then because our level manager has transitions built into it and whatnot, we want to wait at this point. You remember we did this, we've got like transitions and some signals. So our level manager has a level load started. Okay, so once the level load starts, we know the screen is black. So while the screen is black and we can't see anything, it's faded out. This is where we're going to update our player. Let's use our player manager to access the player. And let's go ahead and open this real quick. So for those of you who have been following along, we already have a set player position function. So that's the first one we're going to use. So let's go back to our SaveManager. So we'll do player manager dot set. Oh, I'm not getting the hint. Let's see, what is it? Set player position. Let me just copy that. Set player position. And let's see. I'm going to close a couple of these things I've been opening. So what this requires is just the new position. It's a vector 2. So what we need to do is we need to construct that from, you remember we stored the X and the Y values as separate values. So in here, we'll just create a new vector 2, and then we'll get the current save, current underscore save dot player dot POS. I'm going to laugh at that every time now. Okay, so we'll get the X and then we'll get the Y. So we'll just copy that, paste it, and change that to Y. So we're going to create a new vector 2 out of those 2 variables and use that to set the player position. And then we want to set the player health, which we don't have a function to do that yet. So let's do this. Let's go down here. I don't know, wherever you want to put it. I'm actually going to put it, it seems more important than the player position in hierarchy of my brain. So I'm going to put it up here first. So let's make a new function. Set health. And let's see, I think what we want to do with set health is we want to take in the hit points and the max hit points, right? So we can set both of them, because the hit points is going to dictate his current health and the max hit points is going to dictate how many hearts he has, or how much health he has to set. So we'll take both of those in. And then this is actually going to be pretty straightforward, I think. Let's see, we have our player reference in here. So we just take our player. You know, I think we do HP first, then max HP. Just to be careful, I'm going to set max HP first. Because, you know, if you've got code that's going to limit the HP, which I know we do at some point, I can't remember exactly how it works. But we'll set the max HP first so that it doesn't get clamped. And then let's take our player HP and set it to the value we pass in. All pretty simple stuff, right? I'm not doing anything crazy here, no rocket science. And then let's call our player update HP function, and we're not going to give him, we're not going to heal him or take any health away, so I'm going to pass 0. But this player update HP function is what's going to update the UI and all that. So that's important to call that function right there. Okay, so we've got a player set health function. Let's go back to our SaveManager, and let's call that player manager set health. Right? Is that what I called it? Just set health? Okay. Set health. And then let's just pass in the 2 values that we need. So not player, let's see, current save dot player dot HP and current save max HP. So that should update the player health. And then let's do one more wait here. Before we do anything else in our load, let's go to our level manager, level loaded. We'll just wait for that to finish. So anything else that needs to happen after the level's been loaded, we'll do that here. We'll just do omit our game loaded signal. And actually that's it for now. So anything that's going to update the player can happen here. Loading the level here. Hopefully that's pretty clean and straightforward. And yeah, let's go ahead and just run this and see what happens. Okay, so we've actually already saved our game once. So let's go down to load. I think that's where we saved it. You'll notice that our health is decreased by a little bit because the last time we saved, we ran into an enemy. Let's go to a different screen and load. Okay, took us back there. Let's go to a different screen and save it. Let's save it down here in the bottom right corner. And then let's go up here and let's lose some health. Let's go get damaged by an enemy. And then we're total wimps and we're like, oh, I'm gonna die. I gotta load my game. There we go, right back. Our health filled up. Got a nice simple save load system. Now I think there's only one thing that I want to do, and there's a little bit of a jarring blink when we hit load. So let's just go, boop, 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 boop. We're on our pause menu. Let's see, let's look at the pause menu script. Now when we load our game here, I think this is where we want to do something. Instead of just hiding the pause menu as soon as this is done, let's just add an await, level manager. Remember, we did this in our other thing, but as soon as the level load has started, not level loaded, level load started, that's when the screen's black. That's when we'll hide this. So let's go ahead and try this one more time. Perfect. Just a little bit smoother there, okay? We do have one issue where our mouse isn't working with this HUD, and it's kind of tricky, but it's actually really straightforward and simple. So looking at our pause menu, it's on layer 1. Open up the player HUD, and this is on player 2, which means it's above the pause menu. And this giant control that houses our player HUD is actually stopping all the mouse clicks. You see that? So if you look under the control mouse filter, it's set to stop. If you change that to ignore and then run your game again, now when we look at it, the mouse can interact with these buttons. So that's how we can fix that issue. And that might be stopping or causing other issues if you're trying to, use mouse interactions for other things in this game. Like, I don't know if any of you were trying to use mouse as part of your controls. So that's how we fix that one. So I hope this was helpful to you. Like I say, we're going to be utilizing this save system, adding on to it, and making it more robust in the future. But hopefully this gets you started on your next step in your game and helping you build a save system. And I hope that this helped you out. If you enjoy the content I'm providing, please give me a like on the video, subscribe to my channel, comment if you've got questions, and as always, we'll see you next time.